Cruise?
I tried calling him to tell him I would be dropping the cruise name, and all I received in return was silence. That chilling line, according to accounts attributed to Tom Cruise's daughter in various media narratives, has shaken the carefully curated image Hollywood has built around the actor's family for nearly 18 years. In these reports, Suri is said to have shared that she has not seen her father in over a decade. To the world, he appears polished, charming, and exemplary. But in her perspective, he has never truly been present in the role of a father. No hugs, no check-ins, no attempts to reconnect. And the most startling moment came when she turned 18 and decided to no longer use the Cruise surname, a symbolic statement often interpreted as "I no longer have a father." But that was only the surface. In versions of the story circulating online, Suri is described as revealing a childhood lived under intense media attention years of paparazzi pursuit. The pressure of growing up around Scientology and the loneliness of not having her father at key milestones in her life. What she is said to recount is unlike anything the public has previously heard about Tom Cruise. So, what is the truth behind these narratives? And what could drive an 18-year-old to challenge one of Hollywood's most powerful names? Let's begin with the first part of this unfolding story. 1. I called him to tell him I would be leaving the Cruise name, and all I received was silence. This statement, according to a source interviewed by E! Insider in June 2024, sent a wave of shock through all of Hollywood. In just one brief moment, the image of the perfect father the public once admired, Tom Cruise, the eternal superstar of American cinema, suddenly appeared fragile, fractured, and more distant than ever. Because behind that chilling sentence was an even more painful truth: Suri had not seen her father for more than a decade. To the world, Tom Cruise is the embodiment of elegance, strength, and dedication. Whenever he appears in front of cameras, he flashes a radiant smile, opens his arms to greet fans, and turns every movie premiere into a grand event. But according to a feature aired on New York Star Report in 2023, that image of the ideal father exists only on the red carpet, not in the living room where his daughter grew up. Throughout her childhood, Suri never felt the warmth of a father's embrace, never had a single afternoon at the park with him, nor a birthday with the man standing behind her cake to celebrate her. A former teacher of Suri who agreed to speak with ABC News Local on the condition of anonymity recalled that at every school performance fair, art event, or year-end ceremony, she only ever saw Katie Holmes sitting in the front row, her eyes lighting up each time her daughter stepped on stage. Just the two of them. Always. "We never saw Tom, not even once," she said. A childhood friend of Suri told Manhattan Youth Digest that Suri once tried reaching out to her father. Her messages were simple. "Are you doing well? Will you be free this weekend? I have a performance today. I want you to see it just once." But the messages disappeared into silence. When she sent the most important message of her life, the message saying she would change her last name. Suri sat quietly for hours waiting for her screen to light up with the word "Dad." It didn't. It never did. That was the first night I saw Suri truly understand how cruel silence can be, the friend said. Meanwhile, in front of millions of TV viewers, Tom Cruise remained flawless. He smiled broadly, told lively stories, and signed hundreds of autographs in a single evening. But to his daughter, he was an absence stretched into infinity. It was the harsh contrast that ET magazine called the shadow behind the spotlight, a reality only children born into famous families truly understand. Suri's childhood, was defined by a cycle of waiting that never found an answer. At the school festival when she was 6, she stood behind the curtain holding her teacher's hand and asking, "Will he come?" At 8, she performed a poetry, reading her eyes, scanning the audience. At 10 on her birthday, Katie Holmes shared that Suri woke up early and placed her phone beside her, waiting for the first call of the day. But like every year, it never came. The disappointment accumulated over the years and hardened into a painful truth: her father always chose work belief systems and the bright lights of the industry over family. A family psychology expert invited by the Hollywood Inside explained, "Children never stop loving their parents. They just stop hoping." And Suri, according to those around her, had stopped hoping long ago. Her decision to drop the Cruz surname was not an impulsive act of an 18-year-old girl. It was the final punctuation mark on a relationship that had existed only in headlines. New York Daily Entertainment commented, "When a child carrying the last name of one of Hollywood's most powerful men decides to abandon it, that says more than any interview ever could." To Suri, that name did not represent power, prestige, or triumph. It represented emptiness. But that emptiness did not come only from her father. It also came from a childhood under constant media pursuit. From the moment she could walk, Suri was surrounded by photographers as if she were a moving target. Images of her crying in her mother's arms with 20-30 cameras flashing inches from her face, once published on Page 6, shocked the public. A former paparazzi speaking on Hollywood Unfiltered recalled, "We didn't chase her out of malice. We chased the Cruz name. But thinking back now, I feel sorry for her." Suri grew up among clicking shutters, harsh flashes, and the chaos no child should endure. While her father's world consisted of film sets, helicopters, belief circles, and applause, her own world was defined by constant uncertainty, always hiding behind her mother's coat to avoid being recognized. Katie Holmes tried in every way she could to build a peaceful environment for her daughter. Slow walks in the city, pastries at a nearby cafe, school days like any ordinary student. But that peace constantly clashed with the whirlwind of fame that followed Tom Cruise. A family friend told NBC Lifestyle Suri grew up between two worlds, and she always had to choose. One was noisy, powerful, and overwhelming. The other was the quiet life Katie worked so hard to protect. And in the end, though, still young, Suri chose her mother's world, a world without her father. In the excerpt quoted by E! Insider, Suri was said to have spoken a sentence that left many trembling: "I don't hate him. I just don't wait for him anymore." It was the statement of a child who had grown up far too early, a child who had learned that sometimes silence is the clearest answer of all. Part 1 of this story ends with that truth. Tom Cruise, the perfect father in the public eye, had been absent for the entirety of his daughter's life. But what made that absence so absolute? What could lead a father to distance himself from his own child? The answer lies not on film sets, not in Hollywood, but somewhere far more unsettling, a force that shaped the entire Cruise family. And that will be the story of the next chapter. 2. I lost my father the moment he chose Scientology. That was the statement attributed to Suri, quoted in a 45-minute feature on ETX Hollywood Report, aired in July 2024. Just 6 short words, yet enough to reveal a truth the Cruise family had never addressed. Publicly, Scientology was not just Tom Cruise's belief, it was what stood between him and his daughter for 18 years. According to ETX, those who knew the Holmes Cruise family before 2012 described Scientology as an invisible but ruthless wall. It didn't strike, restrain, or threaten directly, but it created a boundary. Anyone who crossed it would be treated as someone to be cut off, a term widely discussed in the entertainment world for years. And it was that very boundary, the source reported, that gradually pushed Suri out of her father's life, as if it were an inevitable rule. From a very young age, Suri was believed to have lived under close observation by Scientology members, often mentioned by international media. A former member of the group who once spoke to Skyline Entertainment News explained that children in families of high-ranking followers are frequently monitored to ensure adherence to guidelines. Though he did not mention Suri by name, his account drew strong parallels to the environment she lived in when still with Tom Cruise. Katie Holmes, as described by New York Entertainment Review, was confined by an atmosphere so restrictive it felt suffocating. Her private phone calls were sometimes logged, and friends she interacted with reportedly needed approval from certain assistants. Individuals long speculated to have ties to Scientology. A close source shared in an interview she always felt watched. She never knew who was truly a friend and who was there to observe. But what haunted Suri most were the sessions ETX referred to as mental assessments, tense meetings where children were asked questions they didn't understand but were required to answer. Someone close to the Holmes family recalled Suri once asking her mother, "Why does everyone want to know what I think? Did I do something wrong?" Katie reportedly held her tightly, unable to give an answer. Scientology, according to those who witnessed it, didn't just shape Tom Cruise's life, it influenced every decision within the household. ETX quoted an industry analyst saying every turning point in the Cruise family had Scientology in the background. That included the increasing distance between Tom and his daughter after the marriage began to unravel. One detail published by Cinema Talk Weekly in 2024 left many unsettled. Suri once asked her mother, "Why can't I see Dad?" And Katie simply replied, "Because there are things bigger than you and me." That vague response, according to a family friend, planted an unnamed fear in Suri's heart for years. The breaking point came when Katie decided to leave the marriage. According to an investigative piece by Los Angeles Art and Life, Katie quietly prepared her exit plan for 3 months, changing her phone number, moving documents, and informing only 2 trusted people. The source noted she had to do it that way because she was afraid. Not afraid of Tom, she was afraid of Scientology, a statement that stirred public debate at the time. American media repeatedly asked, why would a young woman living in one of Hollywood's most influential marriages need to escape? Why did she have to be so absolute? And the answer, according to those close to her, always came down to one reason: to protect Suri. The years spent under the shadow of Scientology left Suri with the lasting belief that her father had chosen that belief system over his family. That, according to ETX, was the deepest wound she carried into adulthood. A former friend of Tom, speaking anonymously to Hollywood Archive, shared Tom never said it outright, but for him, Scientology was like air. He couldn't live without it. And if he couldn't step away from Scientology, it also meant he could not step away from its rules, including limiting contact with those who no longer belonged. Among everything Suri was told or came to understand, one truth pained her the most. Tom had never publicly spoken up for her in the face of Scientology. When rumors spread that Katie had left the faith, when tabloids claimed Suri was not allowed access to her father, Tom never offered clarification, affirmation, or denial for the world to hear. He remained silent. And to Suri, that silence was devastating. A cultural commentator said on America TV Spotlight, "For a child, the harshest thing is not that their parent is wrong. It's that their parent does not stand with them when it matters most. According to the source, Suri felt this throughout her childhood. When Katie and Suri stepped away from Scientology, it became the only turning point that gave the two freedom. They moved to New York, lived simply without bodyguards, without protective teams, without any trace of Scientology. But that was also when the distance between Tom and Suri became absolute. Not because she didn't want to see her father, but because she knew he would never cross the boundary that organization had created. In an internal statement quoted by ETX, Suri was said to have explained, "If Dad takes one step toward me, Scientology will pull him back 10 steps." It was her way of understanding why he vanished from her life, and many commentators believed it wasn't a statement of resentment, but of acceptance. Leaving Scientology gave Katie and Suri the life they had always wished for, but in exchange, they lost Tom entirely. According to multiple former members who spoke to the media, Scientology follows a principle: leaving means no longer belonging. Though never publicly confirmed, this belief led many to assume the rift between Tom and his daughter had never been repaired. That is why when Suri turned 18, when she announced she would no longer carry the cruise name, the world finally understood that this separation had not begun today. It had begun long ago, the day Scientology entered the family's life. Part 2 ends with the shadow of an organization known mostly through rumors. But for Suri, that shadow is memory, and it is the very foundation of the reasons she now grown dares to speak about what had lived in silence for years. And now comes the question: if Scientology stood between father and daughter, what kept Katie and Suri standing strong for 18 years? The answer lies in Part 3, where the secrets Katie Holmes kept for a decade are finally recounted through Suri's eyes. Do you want me to write it now? 3. I saw my mother cry. Not because of the divorce, but because she was afraid one day they would come and take me away. That sentence, quoted from a conversation that Global Celebrity Report said came from one of Suri's close friends, made the entire studio fall silent for several seconds when it aired at the end of 2024. It was the first time the public heard an admission about the quiet fear Katie Holmes carried during the final years of her marriage to Tom Cruise, a fear tied to Scientology and a private battle she fought alone to keep her daughter by her side. According to the program, many people close to Katie knew she spent countless sleepless nights haunted by the possibility that the organization could separate Suri from her mother at any moment. A friend of Katie recalled, "There were nights when she sat beside her daughter's bed just watching Suri sleep. She was afraid that when she opened her eyes the next morning, her daughter wouldn't be there anymore." Though these stories came only from unofficial accounts, they were enough to send chills down the spines of viewers. Broadway Life and Society, in a 2023 segment, reported that Katie had spent months quietly planning her escape. Unable to trust anyone, unable to rely on assistance, unable to confide in friends, she chose the loneliest path, collecting documents by herself, contacting lawyers on her own, arranging travel plans in secret, even finding a new apartment in New York under an alias to avoid being monitored. One close source said Katie lived like someone preparing to flee a battlefield. She couldn't afford a single mistake. Suri, though very young at the time, still sensed something was wrong. In an interview reconstructed by ETX Hollywood Report, she said her mother was always tense, always checking the doors, always glancing over her shoulder when walking down the street. Once, when Suri asked why her mother locked the door 3 times, Katie reportedly replied, "To make sure you stay with me." A gentle answer, but in Suri's retelling it carried a weight of unspoken fear. When the divorce finally happened, events moved so quickly that the public could barely keep up. The media buzzed, Hollywood reeled, but behind that chaos were two quiet figures, a mother and daughter leaving the glamorous world behind and moving into a small apartment in New York. According to Manhattan Daily Arts, the apartment was the complete opposite of the lavish lifestyle Suri had once known. No security team, no assistants, no staff. Everything began again from scratch. Katie brought her daughter to school, bought groceries at night, did the laundry herself, and restarted her career from the ground up. A close source noted Katie no longer lived in a mansion worth tens of millions, but she had never looked more like someone who was finally free. Suri recounted that she often saw her mother work until exhaustion, long nights on set returning home, only to review contracts, study scripts, and worry about finances. Yet, no matter how tired she was, the moment she stepped into her daughter's room, Katie's face always softened into a warm smile. She hid her worries well, Suri was quoted as telling her friend. She wanted me to feel safe. And I know she sacrificed everything to make that happen. According to several entertainment outlets, Katie understood clearly that walking away from Scientology and from Tom Cruise meant losing her status, losing protection, and losing certain financial advantages. But she still did it. She chose her daughter, the source confirmed, and she accepted losing everything else. That choice shaped the way Suri viewed her father. Commentators on various programs have asked, why didn't Suri try reconnecting with him once she grew older? Why didn't she take the initiative to rebuild the relationship? And the answer, according to those who heard her confide, was simple yet heartbreaking. I saw my mother become lighter when she left him. I saw her happier, and I think that was all I ever needed to know. The two developed a special bond from there, not just mother and daughter, but two survivors who had lived through an invisible war together. They walked to school, to supermarkets, to theater performances, shared simple dinners, laughed, cried, and learned how to live a life with no shadows of Scientology trailing behind them. A cultural observer interviewed by NBC Lifestyle commented, Suri and Katie share a kind of bond only people who have experienced deep fear together can understand. As Suri entered her teenage years, she began to recognize the strength her mother had passed on to her, patience, calmness, and a fierce determination to protect what mattered most. She described them as the things I learned from my mother, and with those she found the courage to speak her truth at 18. According to those close to her, Suri believed that every secret her mother kept had a good reason. She understood that Katie remained quiet not out of fear, but to protect her daughter, to allow Suri to grow up in the most peaceful environment possible. And when she finally became old enough to choose for herself, she chose to speak. I feel like I have to continue what my mother started, Suri was quoted as saying in ETX's feature. She was brave to protect me. Now it's my turn to be brave and speak. The secrets Katie carried for years, the sleepless nights, the days of running the fear of being watched, the months living as though facing a powerful force, all became the answer to the biggest question. Why did Suri choose a life without her father? Not because she hated him, not because she wanted to sever ties, but because she had seen her mother finally free, finally happy, no longer standing under the enormous shadow cast by Tom Cruise in Scientology. And in that moment, the moment Suri understood her mother's choice, she shaped her own path. But the story still does not end there. Because after speaking her truth, Suri had to face the hardest part, stepping into the light with a new identity, a new future, and a decision that could shake Hollywood. 4. I don't want to carry a last name that makes people see me as someone's shadow. That statement, said to be from Suri and cited by Global Youth Voice in August 2024, set social media ablaze. Because it was not only her explanation for changing her surname, it was her first declaration of independence as a young adult. And her new name, Suri Noel, was not just her mother's name. It was the symbol of an 18-year journey toward freedom identity and stepping out of the massive shadow known as Cruz. According to ETX Hollywood's section Celebrity Next Generation, the decision to change her surname was not impulsive. Sources say Suri had thought about it for years, but only at 18 did she finally have the legal right to sign the documents herself. A former high school friend revealed she once said that every time she wrote her full name, it felt like wearing a coat too heavy, too big, and not hers. And changing her surname, that friend said, was Suri's way of telling the world she wanted to live her own life, not the life her father's name had created for her. Manhattan Young Arts Journal commented that choosing the surname Noel was a symbolic turning point, a way for Suri to say she no longer wished to be tied to the glamour drama or legacy of Tom Cruise. Instead, she chose to stand with the person who raised her, protected her, and gave her a peaceful life, Katie Holmes. According to those who know her, Suri has always loved the arts, writing, music, painting, and experimenting with small creative school projects. But she never wanted to pursue creativity under the label Tom Cruise's daughter. In a conversation reconstructed by Campus Confidential, she was quoted saying, "I want to be recognized for my work, not for my last name." And Suri Noella was her first ticket to entering the creative world on her own terms. College life opened a new chapter for Suri, where she was no longer the child whispered about whenever she walked down the street with her mother, no longer the target of paparazzi, no longer the figure caught in an invisible war between Tom Cruise and Scientology. At university, she was simply a student in a dorm room sipping coffee before class, walking to lectures with headphones on, blending into the everyday stories of youth. A classmate told New York Collegiate magazine no one would imagine she had such a complicated past. She's friendly, a bit reserved, but genuinely kind. It was in this environment that Suri began opening up to new friends, something she rarely did before. A source close to the Holmes family said Suri was once terrified of sharing anything about her childhood. Not out of shame, but out of fear that once she spoke, people would see her as a Hollywood kid living off her father's fame and privilege. She didn't want that image, the source shared. She didn't want pity or judgment based on the Cruise name. In a reconstructed conversation on Campus Conversations, Suri reportedly told a close friend that she doesn't resent her father, but also no longer expects anything from him. Because throughout her childhood, she waited too many times, and each time silence answered her. "When you've waited for something that never comes," she was quoted saying, "you learn to walk forward on your own." That is why, when looking toward the future, Suri chose a completely independent path, a life without Scientology, without Hollywood pressures, without the Cruise name, without her father's shadow appearing in every decision she made. She wanted to write her next chapter with her own hands and her own heart. And that choice, according to many cultural commentators, is rare among those born into extremely famous families. Even so, Suri has not completely closed the door on her father. American People Weekly quoted a source close to the Holmes family saying Suri once shared, "If one day he wants to see me, I will listen. But this time, he has to be the one to take the step." That was not resentment. It was the boundary of someone who had grown up, someone who understood her worth and knew that love within a family cannot come from one side. For many viewers, that statement became the perfect punctuation mark for Suri's journey, a girl born into flashing cameras, raised in media storms, living through invisible battles, finally finding herself in a life that is simple, peaceful, and self-defined. Global Celebrity Report described Suri's story as a journey to find freedom from big names. A journey where Suri chose to walk away from what once was family, not out of anger, but to preserve the peace her mother fought so hard to secure. Many media analysts say Suri's decision to change her surname is not only a declaration of independence from the Cruz family, but also a message to anyone raised in the shadow of a powerful figure to grow up. Sometimes you must step out of that shadow, no matter how enormous it may be. And so Suri's story closes with a quiet form of maturity to achieve peace. Sometimes one must walk away from even the things called family. A conclusion without drama or extravagance, yet weighted with meaning, just like the journey she has lived from being in Katie Holmes's arms to officially taking her new name, Suri Noel. The story of Suri Noel is not that of a girl born into luxury, but of a young woman brave enough to rise from the shadow of her own family. From the silence of a powerful father, to the fear of a mother fighting in the dark, and finally to Suri's own voice, strong, clear, and honest. She doesn't need noise to prove herself. She only needs a new name, a new life, and the right to walk forward on her own. And even though she let go of the Cruz surname, even though she stepped out of Hollywood's spotlight, she left the door open, a chance for reconciliation if one day her father has the courage to approach her. But until then, the world must see Suri through a new lens. Not as Tom Cruise's daughter, not as the Hollywood child chased by cameras, but as Suri Noel, an independent individual, a young woman who knows who she is and who she wishes to become. And now the question turns to you watching this video. What do you think about Suri's journey? Do you believe Tom Cruise will one day seek reconciliation? Or do you think the break between them is too deep to heal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the secret stories, behind-the-scenes drama, and Hollywood insights we bring every day. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.